Hello and welcome back, and before we start today's video, a quick PSA, a public service announcement to do with this Seagate Ironwolf 20TB Pro Series drive. First and foremost, off the bat, I'm sure a number of you have already noticed this drive has been reviewed all over the gaff for the better part of a year. So why am I talking about it now here on the channel? Why should you care? And hence why we need this announcement, because there is, and I've talked about it already on the channel, this is a new version of this drive. And if you have come to this video because you're on the verge of buying yourself a Seagate Ironwolf Pro 20TB, or you're upgrading or replacing some of the drives in your configuration, adding more drives to your RAID array, bear in mind the model ID is not the same. This is the NT version released towards the end of 2022, and this is one with an increased workload rating and just general better durability than that of its predecessor, more designed comparable to that of the Exos series of enterprise drives rather than Pro. I just wanted to slam this at the front of the video because it's really important if you're watching this either as an upgrade to your existing RAID setup or to expand your existing RAID, to know this is not the same as the first generation of Ironwolf Pro drives that we're going to talk about, and a lot of the specifications we're going to talk about are reflective of this. But for now, I bung that on the table, try not to knock it over my elbow, and run that intro. Hello and welcome back, and that weirdly energetic intro to aside, let's talk about it. This is the Seagate Ironwolf Pro 20TB. We talked a lot about high capacity drives in the last 2 or 3 months here on the channel, and I've been waiting to get this inside a lot of the test machines here for a while. Now, if you're not aware, we've already talked about Ironwolf. I would do an unboxing, but that's it. It arrives in a lovely anti-static bag traditionally there, and they've changed the outright design of the Ironwolf Pro series, the NT series, as mentioned in the introduction. And the NT series is slowly being rolled out across the majority of the capacities there. Although I don't know the reason why, because on the one hand, yes, they could be rolling out the NT series with a higher durability rating out the kindness of their heart. I personally think it's to do with hardware shortages out there, and therefore when you look at the data sheets from Seagate, you may notice that with every capacity there is actually 2 versions of the 20, 2 versions of the 18, 2 versions of the 16, etc, etc. This isn't unusual. Lots of hard drive brands do this when they run different model IDs together at the same time within the same series. But with hardware shortages impacting a number of very key components in a lot of hardware, and certain semiconductor components are obviously in big shortages due to, if not the climate change and hardware resource shortages, then of course there is the effect from the old pandemic, the Pan-D. But on top of that, you've got things like the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which is impacting the world's availability of neon in a number of places as well. So with hardware shortages knocking around all over the place, it doesn't surprise me that Seagate might release a secondary version of a lot of their products. And it's just great to see that the NT version of this has got the higher workload and durability that we'll talk about later on. But I will highlight immediately off the bat there that if you've come to this video and you're looking at the price knocking around online, you may have noticed in some places like the UK, we're seeing the Seagate Ironwolf 20TB knock around for about 460 to close to 500 nicker for the 20TB drive. In Europe, 489 to about 510, 520. But in the US, there seems to be a lot more of the previous generation of these drives knocking around, hence why you might look on Amazon and suddenly see the 20TB drive for $350, which, by the way, absolute bargain. So if you do see it, snap that bad boy up. But again, it comes down to that durability. When there were reviews of the 20TB on other platforms, fair play, I'm not the only one in the world, let's be realistic, but other platforms that were reviewing this drive, one of the consistent criticisms that came through on the first generation of 20TB Seagate Ironwolf Pro drive was, although it maintained the same 300 TB workload as all the other capacities behind it, the minute you start doubling up on the capacities there, going from 10, getting to your 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 TB, the workload rate, and if that doesn't change, yes, that's good to the hardware architecture, but you're reaching a point where the amount of data afforded to you on the scale becomes a negative balance against that of the workload there. So once you reach those capacities, it's nice to see that now you can get this Pro Series drive with that improved workload. Let's get it out of the way straight away. The previous generation Arrived with a 300 TB workload, that's per year over its 5-year warranty. The newer generation device is at 550, comparable to that of Seagate Ironwolf for a WD UltraStar drive, which is huge, almost double that of its predecessor there. On top of that, the MTBF, which I'm not as fussed about realistically. I mean, again, unless you're going hyperscale, MTBF is not a figure that most of us need to be overtly concerned with. But meantime between failure was increased from 1.2 million to 2.5 million in the newer generation drive. So again, comparable to that of an enterprise grade drive, and arguably the NT series is sort of acting as that counter argument we've had many times before, indeed in a video back in October, November, of should you buy Pro, should you buy ENT level drives. This seems to be a nice middle ground there between them, and that combined with that 5 years of warranty and the 3 years of data recovery services, yum, talked about it before. Again, you get 3 years data recovery thrown in there, which they will recover your drive on a forensic level for you there, and again, it's covered in a bunch of other ways as well. Check out the video on that, I'm sure the GIFs are on screen. But all those things combined to make it a very appealing drive for even, doesn't have to go enterprise 12, 16 bay rack now. This is a drive that we could look at for 4 to 8 bay, although do bear in mind it's going to sound like the creation of the universe once you've got several of these drives together, but more on the noise later on. The standard hardware won't come as a tremendous surprise. It is conventional magnetic recording, there's none of the SMR here. On top of that, conventional magnetic recording is built on 10 platters there inside at 7200 RPM. It's a single actuator drive. There isn't the dual actuator there like the Mac 2. More on that in another review very soon. And it is pretty much standard what you'd expect, 256 megabyte cache there on board. A reported transfer rate in the 280s, I think it's 285 is the official report. We will be doing a Windows desktop test later in the video. But overall, I mean, I could show you it, but frankly, you kind of know what you're looking at there. It's a standard hard drive. They've done a lot to squeeze in 10 platters there. How did they do it? Well, it's, you know, fairly established at this point in 2023. It's thanks to helium, and these drives being sealed with helium there allows them to reduce the drag and the potential friction of those platters by making them even thinner. And that's how they're getting so many platters inside this drive. And again, at 10 platters and a single arm reading from that, that's really impressive indeed. Now, the things you're going to have to wonder about, again, is your noise, your durability, and your performance, and hopefully we're going to tackle all of that in this video. So without further ado, we've talked about that drive, let's make our way into the individual tests for it. Right, so we're set up here for the first part of the sound testing. Straight away, there is our 20 TB drive there. We've got the other ENT drives in there, the 20s. We're going to install it in just a moment. Before we do so though, a few disclaimers off the bat. Obviously, we're dealing a distance here of barely a foot. So again, if you're about a meter away, you have to be reflective of that. Also, my voice is being picked up by the decibel monitor here. So if I'm quiet just for a moment, you can see that the level is going to go low, but of course we are in a working environment. We're never going to get it to zero. This is not a soundproof environment there. But for now, let's get this drive installed inside this system. And what we'll do is we'll allow the system to go through full boot. Later on, we'll be doing performance measurements with this device, and so we can get some idea of the NAS compatibility and performance of the 20 TB Seagate Ironwolf Pro. But for now, what I'm going to do is press that power button, and then I'm going to let the system do its own thing for a bit and step away from the mic. So I'm just going to move now and then power it up and leave you with the device for the next minute or so. So as you can see, that number definitely stayed somewhere in the 30s for the bulk of that. What I'm going to do now is fast forward to the completion of the boot of this device, and then I'm going to simulate high operation with that drive inside this QNAP to give you some idea about the noise level that will be generated later. I think it just turned itself off. But for now, I'm going to fast forward to this being completed, and then we'll go through high use of that drive to see how that sounds. Okay, so we've got the device fully booted there. You can see there on screen, there is our drive. There is the ST20000 hard drive there in the NT series. And what we're going to do is run ourselves a cheeky little benchmark test there on that drive. Let's go ahead on there, on that drive, and run ourselves a performance test. First will be a sequential read-write performance test. Then we're going to run a brief IOPS test there on screen. So again, we're going to leave that there. It's going to do its own thing. It won't take too long. I think it moves around about 10 gig of data back and forth to get that benchmark. The IOPS tests, we're only going to include the IOPS testing, not because we think this drive is going to give us any kind of meaningful IOPS rating. Realistically, it is a hard drive, nothing like an SSD. But we're going to include the IOPS test once again to give you a little understanding of the noise level. Because during that IOPS test, that is when you will hear a drive at its noisiest. And if you're going to run a drive like this in a big bulk array, you are going to notice it there. So you can see, even though the other drives are 14 TB drives there, they're all enterprise grade. They're all going to be built not dissimilar to this. So that drive, it's, you know, if you're going to run even a medium-sized configuration with a drive like this, you're going to hear it over that. But as you can see, we've got our rating of 253 megabytes per second. They're slightly lower than I would have liked, but again, it's always the same when you see the NAS testing versus the desktop PC testing, which you'll see later on. But for now, we're going to run that IOPS testing. This will take a bit longer, but also you are going to hear some noise. So I'm going to be quiet for a sec. And just to put that into a sense of perspective, so we're getting that consistent noise level there of those IOPS, and it's just when you are doing lots of operations with enterprise grade drives, it's always worth highlighting this. I say it in a lot of videos, but I'll say it again, these are not quiet drives. But there is our benchmark there on the QNAP system. So what I'm going to do now is format this drive and move it over to a Synology system to see what that benchmarks, and just to double check that it is indeed compatible. Let's fast forward. And on to the Synology testing now. We've got the DS93 Plus. We've got the drive in here formatted and good to go. So we can get that drive inside there. Get it slotted in. And for now, we can go ahead and click that and start powering up now. At the moment, we've got this installed with some UltraStar hard drives inside there as well. So again, we are going for enterprise level drives. What we're going to do is, as soon as the system has finished booting, when we see those green lights, I'm just going to let the device run for a noise background there. You've got the monitor there on the bottom of the screen, and hopefully you should get some real-time information about the noise that this is generating. Then of course we will perform some benchmarks there of the drive using Synology Storage Manager. But for now, we're getting that boot. I'm going to step away and leave this for a minute or so to do its thing. Okay, so the system has finished pretty much the first stages of its boot. Again, bear in mind, the reason we're doing this is so we can see how much noise an enterprise level drive on its own, or even in a big RAID array with other enterprise drives, is going to generate, for those of you that are still unaware of the noise difference. So what I'm going to do on my side now is just start making my way into this NAS. The noise level is starting to creep up there, isn't it? Should allow me to scan my network and find the NAS on the local area network, where for you I can then go ahead and access it. Let's go for it there. So let's do a quick scan and we'll log straight in. Go for it there. I apologise if I'm just looking gormless here on the screen at you guys. But for now, let's get that up on a big tab. Let's get it open. OBS is really eating up my resources, guys. Really devouring it. So let's remove that, get that open on there. Again, I'm going to try my best to do as few cuts as possible on this video. But for now, let's go ahead, bring that down, bring that back down there. And we're minimized, get that there, minimize there, and we'll start logging into this device. Trying to type at an angle, slightly upside down, always a pleasure. But for now, we can go ahead and start making our way into the benchmarking of that drive. Going to the storage manager there. We'll be able to log straight in. Let's double check OBS is still doing its thing. Slight drops in frame rate there. You can blame my PC at the moment trying to do too many things at once. For now, let's get that open. The system has just started booting. Let's give it a bit of a moment. We are kind of hitting it when it's got so many different applications that it's trying to load up here on initialization. But for now, let's make our way in and start benchmarking that drive. Let's go to the hardware drive manager. There we are. So for next, we're going to run ourselves a benchmark on that drive, as you can see. So we're going to run that benchmark now. So I'm going to stick around for a minute when it starts, and then I'll disappear just to give you some idea of not only the performance, but obviously the noise as well. So let's let that begin. Give us a quick alert. It will have to wipe the drive a little bit there. And we will go for it now. Well, it took a wee while, but we got there in the end. We can see that the Synology Benchmark, this 20 TB drive at 261 megabytes per second throughput there in read performance and 261 on write performance there. Remember, this was utilizing the drive on its own there. So again, we've got that Synology Benchmark. We've got a good understanding of the noise that you're going to be anticipating on its own or within a larger degree of enterprise drives in a QNAP and Synology. Now, let's power down this device and get that drive inside our PC test machine to get some PC benchmarks. Okay, so we've made our way onto the desktop of our PC here. On the right hand side of the screen, you can see our Crystal disk mark rating there, and not the rating I should say, it's more the specifications there and how long the drive's been on, that sort of thing. And again, lovely stats there, nothing too much to be concerned with there. And indeed, we are later on going to look at temperature, but it's not going to be too much of an issue. There's kind of lots of information there that we can garner throughout these tests. But to be perfectly honest, what we're looking at really is performance, aren't we? I'm running OPS, so I'm there in the bottom right of the screen there. On the left hand side, we've got that data sheet where we can see a lot of the differences there, and again, this should be linked in the article below about the differences between the NE and the NT version of this drive. And of course, we've got that article on NAS Compared, also linked below, that goes into a lot of detail about those differences to do with the durability and performance there. So first things first, while we're going through this, it's worth highlighting that because I'm using OBS and screen recording here, there is going to be a performance dip. What I'm going to do is give you an example of that now. So to put it into perspective, if we open up Crystal Disk Mask, again, you may see a black screen periodically there. You can see right now that the drive is not listed there. You can see we've got it down there. There's like smaller gig files now. So what we need to do is add this drive. So I'm going to go into Disk Management. From there, we're going to, and make sure I can see that there on screen, I apologise. So we'll go into disk management first rather than going to disk part there. We can find our drive just down there at the bottom. We're going to initialize that drive. I'm just going to create a nice simple volume for us there. We're not going to go too crazy there. We're just going to go ahead and create ourselves a quick volume so we can knock around with it there. Again, we'll give it a letter S. Why not? S for Seagate. From there, give it a name. So we're going to go Seagate Ironwolf Pro 20 TB, and this is going to be NT. So again, we're just going to do a quick format there. It should appear nice and quickly on a list of available drives. Also, while we're there, we're just going to double check, and as you can see, our drive has appeared there at the bottom. There's our 20 TB drive. So from there, going back to my earlier point, if we go back into Crystal Disk now, again, that black screen, ignore it, go, and suddenly our S drive has appeared. So we're just going to run some tests there to give you some idea what I mean about where OBS can be problematic. It's going to be a 1 gig test file with a read-write share 70/30. It's not going to be like our SSD testing there. We don't really have the IOPS for that and kind of simultaneous access that is possible that you can really demonstrate with an SSD. If we go into my PC system there, have a look at the system properties, you'll see that this isn't some high-end kind of Ryzen or AMD based power system here. This is an 11th Gen i5, 6 core, and again 16 gig of memory there. Sorry about my phone going off, but for now we're already seeing very early doors 276 megabytes per second there on the read quota. It's the write, however, where we may see something slightly different, and that's to do with the overheads of OBS. Opening up the task there, you can see yes, CPU utilization is going to be higher, but a lot of that is to do with OBS, and this can inevitably impact the performance. So I'm showing you some of this performance here on screen. I do think I'm going to have to shut down OBS, run the test, and come back to give you some comparative data there. I will keep that 1 gig on there, at least for the basis of comparison there, but still, we're seeing reasonable enough numbers there all the way through for us to be getting along with for that drive. And again, hitting that 270, 260, lovely and easy. It's definitely higher than what we saw coming out of those NAS systems there, but that's because we can be a lot more kind of centered and controlling of the test measurements that we're using here. I believe the NASs, I think, use a 10 gig test file there, depending on the NAS brand. One uses 1, another one uses 10. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to commit a bunch of tests here. These tests are going to be run with Atto Disk Benchmark. They're going to be running with AJA, and we're going to be running Black Magic there, just to get some idea about some of the performance on this drive. So what I'm going to do is come back to you in about 40-50 minutes. You can, what's the time here? It is almost 11 AM here in the UK. So I'm just going to fast forward about an hour to the completion of these tests, and we'll go through those results. Let's go. Okay, so our testing has completed and we've got plenty of results to make our way through. Let's start really boring and domestic. And the first thing we want to look at is Windows transfer, because I was able to conduct kind of a low res transfer here without impacting the system too much. And in that test I was able to transfer 22 gig of data, and that's 22.8 gig, and that's a bit blurry there on screen, and that is 2,310 files. And I'll skip ahead. It basically took 2 minutes and around 40 to 45 seconds to complete that transfer there, which again I know doesn't sound like a lot when it's 22 gig, but bear in mind this is a mechanical hard drive transferring that data over, and it is transferring a huge degree of different file sizes, and that was 2,000, well over 2,000 files there. So I was quite impressed with that stat. Again, we'll go into more detail in the comments. If we go over to the Crystal Disk performance there, and again, as we go through, there was our original testing there at the top left. And as we can see, there actually wasn't that much of a difference, even without OBS running. I will say, though, it did impact that kind of mixed read-write, which is kind of the main reason we disabled OBS during the testing there. But on the bottom left, we saw the 1 gig test file, 275 over 265. At just 64 meg test file, we saw 295, which is slightly erroneous when you're dealing with those smaller file sizes over 246. And when we're dealing with a 4 gig test file, 276 over 269. And again, you can largely ignore that 4K number at the bottom there, because again, this is synthetic testing, so not really real world testing. Next up, we can have a look at Atto Disk Benchmark. We performed 3 different tests. Again, we could look at IOPS, we're not really going to, but on the left hand side we saw a 64 meg test down. We peaked along the way there on the read at 295. Again, synthetic, so bear that in mind. But we did see consistent numbers in the 240, 215, even into 260s there. When we went into the 256 meg, so that's a quarter of a gig, we saw consistent numbers again in the 250s and 260s. And finally, with a 1 gig test file, we again got into the 260s either way on both of them. Lovely test results there overall. Next up, we went into, where is it? Make sure I select the right one. After that, we went to do AJA. No wonder I can't find it down there, because I've stacked them all on the bottom of the screen. So we had 264 over 264 when we were testing a 5K red file, and that was a half a gig test file there. Moving forward, we went into a 1 gig 5K red test file. So that's a big chunky sequential, 258 over 255 over 258, and finally 258 over 260 when we were dealing with a 4 gigabyte 5K sequential file. That is a big old file we're talking about there. Now, I could have, not rigged the numbers, but I could have gone in for something smaller, much smaller packet file there, and it would have been much higher numbers indeed. But I wanted to give users of video editing suites that are going to be dealing with large raw files a decent kind of whack there, and that's why I went with in terms of AJA, those larger file sizes there. And finally, we can look at Blackmagic, so we bring that down there, and when we open up the Blackmagic tool, bring that up from the bottom, we can see it was 254 over 262, and that was a 1 gig test. So to put that into perspective, if we go into, say, a 5 gig test there, double check we're still using the same location, click go, we can click start. The first thing you'll observe is a slow spin up. Now, the reason for that is this is a mechanical driver. Unlike testing of SSDs, where the performance would be largely instantaneous, when it comes to benchmarking hard drives, you can often find this slight delay at the beginning of the testing, but it will kick in there, as you can see. So we're peaking there at the 5 gig test file at 265. And the results will be apparent there on the bottom screen. Again, factor in the slight delay that you can, the slight overhead that's coming from us running OBS there in that task manager that we've already discussed before, and its impact on the overall performance, and of course the GPU too. But we hit there 268 there on Blackmagic Read, and for me, those are solid numbers. We didn't hit that 285, at least in the larger comparative test here, but do bear in mind, most benchmarks that are provided by hard drive vendors, not just Seagate, but all of them, tend to use quite powerhouse machines, and also they start playing with the block sizes there, and this is all set to the default settings of your Windows PC here. And moreover, it's worth highlighting, we try to aim for here on the channel relatable tests, even when we have to use synthetic benchmark tools like this. But that's enough here. We can make our way back into the studio and summarize everything we learned today. So what do we think? Well, first and foremost off the bat, the performance pretty darn high. We saw peaks well in excess of 260, and in some of the more bespoke testing we were able to reach it in the 280s there. But it's worth highlighting, you are going to definitely need a higher end machine in order to really eke the most out of this drive. I do like that Seagate have rolled out this more durable drive, particularly now that questions are starting to arrive around the idea of 300 TB workload limits on Pro Series drives when capacities are reaching this high. I think it's a discussion that a lot of enterprise level businesses need to start thinking about when they're opting for Pro Series or Exos drives based on their durability, and this arriving with that 550 TBW and on board that having 2.5 million MTBF, or whatever that means to you, is good, alongside 5 years of warranty and 3 years of data recovery services. That's a decent little add-on to have onto a drive that's already one of the more affordable 20 TB server class drives in the market. And whether you are looking at the NT class drive or you are looking at the previous generation there at that 300 TB annual workload, combined with its price point in the US, knocking around at the 350, 360, 370 mark, it's a very compelling argument to install this in your systems. Yes, it doesn't appear at the moment on a lot of NAS brands compatibility listings, but one, it's quite new, and moreover, there are some NAS brands more than others that seemingly want to promote first-party drives over third-party, and maybe aren't so keen to upgrade their hardware compatibility listings as quick as other ones. But as far as drives go, as 20 TB drives go, I've got nothing to down here. And the NT series is only building on stuff that's already quite popular in this drive series as it is, notwithstanding being CMR, those 10 2TB platters, and just generally being a workhorse of a drive. You're still dealing with the whole all eggs in one basket situation, and therefore You can't really buy one of these, you have to buy two, otherwise that is a lot of data you're putting in a single container. But still, nonetheless, if capacity is vitally important to you right now, it's a solid choice with a whole myriad of either service-led or hardware-built durability and long-term recovery built in there, and definitely something to check out. We haven't even touched on Seagate Ironwolf, but again, a lot of that comes down to it being switched on with different NAS providers, so that's really depending on the device you go for there. And whether you're a data center user or a standard smaller compact NAS buyer who is looking at getting more storage than power for your budget, just remember, this is not a quiet drive, and this is a drive that is gonna make something of a racket the minute you start introducing it into RAID 5 environments, 4, 5, 6, 8, 12, 24 drives. So just remember that you're getting a lot of capacity, but you might want to put it in another room while it's at it. Thank you so much for watching. There should be a written review down below over on NAS Compares that you can check out. On top of that, if you want to learn more, we will be doing a before you buy on the 20 and soon to be 22 TBs from Seagate Ironwolf. What you should like about them, what you might not like about them, coming up very, very soon. Click like if you've enjoyed the video, subscribe to learn more. Use the free advice section linked over on NAS Compares. It's a big blue button on the right hand side of the screen when you go there, and the free community forum at Ask NAS Compares, where me, Eddie, and other members of the NAS community are there to help you out. There are links in the description to Amazon, and if you're going to go there anyway, well, and if this video helped for you, please use those links, as using those will cost you nothing extra, and whatever you buy when you get there results in a kickback here at NAS Compares, and it allows me and Eddie, the two people that run this joint, to do as much as we can. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.